Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Greta spent the rest of the weekend preparing. She researched company policies on gender identity and expression, drafted an email to her supervisor requesting a meeting, and practiced what she wanted to say countless times in front of the mirror. Monday morning arrived all too quickly. Greta, dressed in androgynous clothing, a loose blouse and slacks, a compromise between her true self and the persona her coworkers were used to. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed the send button on the email to her supervisor. The response came quicker than she expected. Her supervisor, Linda, asked her to come to her office at 11 a.m. The hours until the meeting crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity as Greta's anxiety mounted. At precisely 11 a.m., Greta knocked on Linda's door, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard in the hallway. "Come in," Linda called. Greta entered, closing the door behind her. Linda looked up from her computer, her expression neutral, but not unkind. "Have a seat, Gustavo. What did you want to discuss?" Taking a deep breath, Greta sat down. "Thank you for meeting with me, Linda. I have something important to tell you, and I'm not sure how to begin." Linda's expression softened slightly. "Take your time. Whatever it is, we'll work through it." Encouraged by Linda's tone, Greta found her voice. "I've been struggling with something for a long time, and I've recently come to understand and accept it. I'm transgender. I identify as a woman." The words hung in the air for a moment. Linda's eyebrows rose slightly, but her voice remained calm and professional when she spoke. "I see. Thank you for trusting me with this information. Can you tell me more about what this means for you in terms of work?" Relieved by the lack of outright rejection, Greta continued. "I've been living as a woman in my personal life for a while now, but hiding it at work has become increasingly difficult. I'd like to transition here as well. I understand if this is complicated, and I'm willing to work with HR and anyone else to make the process as smooth as possible." Linda nodded thoughtfully. "Well, we have policies in place to support employees through transitions. I'll need to consult with HR about the specifics, but please know that we value you as an employee and want to support you through this process." She paused, then added with a small smile, "Is there a name you'd prefer we use?" Greta felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Greta," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'd like to be called Greta." "All right, Greta," Linda said, the name rolling off her tongue naturally. "Let's set up a meeting with HR later this week to discuss the details. In the meantime, is there anything you need from me or the team?" Greta shook her head, overwhelmed by the positive response. "Just patience, I guess, and understanding. This is all very new and a bit scary for me." Linda reached across the desk, briefly squeezing Greta's hand. "You've got it. And Greta, thank you for your honesty. I know this couldn't have been easy." As Greta left Linda's office, she felt as though a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. There were still many hurdles to overcome, telling her coworkers, navigating the practicalities of transitioning at work. But she'd taken the first crucial step. Over the next few weeks, Greta worked closely with HR to plan her workplace transition. They drafted an announcement to be sent to her team, scheduled sensitivity training for her colleagues, and worked out logistics like updating her email address and name badge. The day the announcement went out, Greta felt a mix of terror and relief. She'd chosen to work from home that day, giving her coworkers time to process the news without the pressure of face-to-face interaction. Messages of support started trickling in almost immediately. Many expressed surprise, but also admiration for her courage. A few admitted they didn't fully understand, but promised to educate themselves and offered their support. There were, of course, a few awkward interactions and missteps in the days that followed. Some colleagues stumbled over her new name or pronouns, while others seemed unsure how to act around her. But overall, the response was far more positive than Greta had dared to hope. As the weeks passed, Greta grew more comfortable presenting as herself at work. She started wearing more feminine clothing, experimenting with makeup, and allowing her true personality to shine through. To her surprise and delight, she found that being authentic actually improved her work performance. Without the constant stress of hiding, she was more focused, more creative, and more engaged with her colleagues. One particularly memorable moment came about a month after her announcement. Greta was in the break room chatting with a coworker when Linda walked in. "Greta," Linda said warmly, "I just wanted to let you know that the client was extremely impressed with your presentation yesterday. They specifically mentioned how confident and knowledgeable you seemed. Great job." As Linda left, Greta's coworker grinned at her.
"Look at you, girl. Killing it in heels and all."
Greta laughed, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. For the first time, she felt truly accepted and valued for who she was, not who she had pretended to be. With the hurdle of coming out at work behind her, Greta turned her attention to the next, and perhaps most daunting, challenge: telling her family. She'd been putting it off, fear of their reaction paralyzing her. But as she grew more comfortable in her identity, the need to be honest with them became overwhelming. She decided to start with her sister Maria. They'd always been close, and of all her family members, Greta thought Maria might be the most likely to understand. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Greta invited Maria over for coffee. As they sat in Greta's living room, mugs in hand, Greta felt her resolve wavering. "So," Maria said, eyeing her sibling curiously, "what's up? You sounded pretty serious on the phone." Greta took a deep breath, setting her mug down on the coffee table. "Maria, I have something important to tell you. It's going to be a shock, I think. But I need you to listen with an open mind, okay?" Maria's brow furrowed with concern, but she nodded. "Of course. You know you can tell me anything." "I'm transgender," Greta blurted out, the words tumbling from her lips before she could lose her nerve. "I'm a woman. I've known for a while now, but I've been afraid to tell anyone in the family." Maria's eyes widened, her mug frozen halfway to her mouth. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Greta felt her heart sink. Then slowly, Maria set her mug down and reached out, taking Greta's hands in her own. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "That must have been so hard to keep to yourself." Tears welled up in Greta's eyes, spilling over as the tension and fear she'd been holding onto for so long finally released. You're not mad?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. Maria squeezed her hands. "Mad? No, of course not. Surprised, yes, but not mad. You're my sibling. I love you, no matter what." She paused, then asked gently, "Do you have a name you'd like me to use?" "Greta," came the tearful reply. "I've been going by Greta." Maria smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind Greta's ear in a gesture of sisterly affection. "Greta, it suits you." They spent the next few hours talking, Greta explaining her journey, answering Maria's questions, and sharing her fears and hopes for the future. By the time Maria left, Greta felt lighter than she had in years, buoyed by her sister's acceptance and love. "You know," Maria said as she was leaving, "I always wondered why you seemed so unhappy, so closed off. This explains a lot. I'm glad you're finally able to be yourself, Greta." With Maria's support, Greta found the courage to come out to the rest of her family. The reactions were mixed. Her parents struggled to understand at first, their traditional views clashing with this new reality. There were tears, arguments, and a period where they barely spoke. But Maria stood by her sister, acting as a bridge between Greta and their parents. She educated herself about transgender issues and patiently explained things to their parents, advocating for Greta when she wasn't there. Slowly, gradually, understanding began to grow. Greta's mother was the first to come around, her maternal instinct overriding her initial shock and confusion. One day, out of the blue, she called Greta and said, "I may not understand everything, but I know I love my child, and I want my child to be happy. If this is what makes you happy, then I support you." Greta's father took longer to come to terms with the situation, but even he, in his own gruff way, eventually came to accept Greta for who she was. The first time he called her daughter instead of son, Greta felt a surge of love and gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. As the months passed, Greta continued to grow and evolve. She refined her style, finding clothes that made her feel confident and beautiful. She experimented with different makeup techniques, learning to accentuate her features in ways that felt authentic to her. Her body changed too, the effects of hormone therapy becoming more pronounced. Her skin softened, her body hair thinned, and she began to develop curves in places that had once been angular and masculine. Each change was a small victory, a step closer to aligning her outer appearance with her inner self. Greta also found herself becoming more involved in the transgender community. She started attending the Sunday coffee meetup Zoe had invited her to, finding comfort and camaraderie among others who understood her experiences. She made new friends, people who had walked similar paths and could offer advice and support. One Sunday, about 6 months after that first night at the club, Greta arrived at the coffee shop to find Zoe waiting for her outside. "Hey," Zoe said, smiling warmly. "Can we talk for a minute before we go in?" Greta nodded, curiosity piqued. They moved to a nearby bench, sitting down side by side. "So," Zoe began, a hint of nervousness in her voice, "I've really enjoyed getting to know you these past few months. You're smart, funny, kind, and, well, I find you incredibly attractive." Greta felt her heart skip a beat, a blush creeping up her cheeks. Zoe continued, "I was wondering if you might like to go out sometime. On a date, I mean, with me." For a moment, Greta was speechless. She'd been so focused on her transition, on coming out to family and coworkers, that the idea of dating hadn't even crossed her mind. But as she looked at Zoe, strong, beautiful, compassionate Zoe, she felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. I'd like that," Greta said softly. "I'd like that very much." Zoe's face lit up with a dazzling smile. "Great! How about dinner next Friday?" As they made plans, Greta felt a sense of possibility she'd never experienced before. Here she was, living as her true self, with a job that accepted her, a family that was learning to understand her, friends who supported her, and now, potentially, a romantic interest who saw her for who she truly was. As she and Zoe walked into the coffee shop, Greta's mind was buzzing with excitement. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries enveloped them as they made their way to their usual corner table. A few regulars from their Sunday meetup were already there, engaged in animated conversation. "Hey, everyone," Zoe greeted the group warmly. "Look who I found outside." Greta waved shyly, still processing the unexpected turn of events. She settled into her usual seat, hyper-aware of Zoe's presence beside her. "Greta, we were just talking about you!" exclaimed Raoul, a flamboyant man with a penchant for vintage brooches. Today's accessory was a glittering peacock pinned to his purple velvet jacket. "Darling, you simply must tell us where you got that divine blouse. It's absolutely you." Greta glanced down at her emerald green silk blouse, a recent purchase she'd been unsure about. "Oh, this. It's from that little boutique on 5th Street. I wasn't sure if it was too much for coffee." "Nonsense," Raoul waved his hand dismissively. "If you can't be fabulous for Sunday coffee, when can you be?" The group laughed, and Greta felt herself relaxing into the familiar camaraderie. As the conversation flowed around her, touching on everything from local LGBTQ+ politics to the latest reality TV drama, Greta found her gaze continually drawn to Zoe. Zoe was deep in conversation with Amelia, a trans woman in her 50s who had become something of a mentor to many in the group. Zoe's brow was furrowed in concentration as she listened, nodding occasionally and asking thoughtful questions. Greta marveled at how Zoe could be so confident and yet so genuinely interested in others' experiences. Earth to Greta, A voice broke through her reverie. It was Max, a non-binary person with a shock of blue hair and a mischievous grin. "You're staring, hun. Something you want to share with the class?" Greta felt her face flush. No, sorry. Just lost in thought." Max's grin widened.
Uh-huh. And would those thoughts happen to involve a certain tall, dark, and handsome lady sitting next to you?"
"Max," Greta hissed, glancing quickly at Zoe to make sure she hadn't overheard. "It's not. We're just—" "Relax, sweetie," Max laughed. "Your secret's safe with me. Well, me and anyone else with eyes. You two have been dancing around each other for weeks." Before Greta could respond, Zoe turned back to them, her conversation with Amelia finished. "What are you two whispering about?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with amusement.
"Oh, nothing much," Max said innocently. "Just discussing the finer points of color coordination. Speaking of which, I need a refill. Anyone else?"
As Max headed to the counter, Zoe leaned in closer to Greta.
"Everything okay?
You seem a little flustered." Greta took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart.
"Yeah, I'm fine. Just processing, I guess. This is all very new to me."
Zoe's expression softened.
"I know, and we can take things as slow as you need. There's no rush, okay?"
Greta nodded, grateful for Zoe's understanding. As the afternoon wore on, she found herself relaxing more, enjoying the easy banter of the group and the subtle, thrilling moments of connection with Zoe. A shared glance, a brief touch of hands as they reached for the sugar at the same time. As the meetup began to wind down, people saying their goodbyes and making plans for the week ahead, Zoe turned to Greta. "Want to take a walk? It's a beautiful day." Greta nodded, gathering her things. They waved goodbye to the remaining group members and stepped out into the warm afternoon sunlight. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their steps falling into sync. Greta marveled at how natural it felt, just being with Zoe like this. "So," Zoe said eventually, "I hope I didn't overwhelm you earlier. With the date invitation, I mean." Greta shook her head. "No, not at all. I was surprised, yes, but pleasantly so." She paused, gathering her courage. "I've actually had feelings for you for a while now. I just didn't know how to express them or if I even should." Zoe stopped walking, turning to face Greta. Her expression was tender, almost vulnerable. "Really? Why didn't you say something?" Greta shrugged, suddenly feeling shy.
"I guess I wasn't sure if I was ready. Dating well, as me. It's uncharted territory, and you're so amazing, Zoe. I wasn't sure if I was enough." Zoe reached out, gently taking Greta's hand in hers. "Greta, listen to me. You are more than enough. You're strong and brave and beautiful, inside and out. I've watched you grow so much over these past months, and I fall a little more for you every day." Greta felt tears pricking at her eyes, overwhelmed by Zoe's words and the depth of emotion in her gaze. Without thinking, she leaned forward, pressing her lips softly against Zoe's. When they parted, both women were slightly breathless. "Wow," Zoe whispered, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That was—" "Yeah," Greta agreed, unable to stop her own grin. "It really was." They stood there for a moment, hands still clasped, smiling at each other like lovesick teenagers. Finally, Zoe cleared her throat. "So, about that date on Friday," Greta laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I can't wait." As they continued their walk, hands intertwined, Greta felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and new experiences. But for the first time, she felt truly, completely herself. And with Zoe by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The sun was beginning to set as they made their way back to the coffee shop where Greta had parked her car. The sky was a canvas of oranges and pinks, casting a warm glow over the city streets. "This has been a perfect day," Greta said softly, reluctant for it to end. Zoe squeezed her hand. "It really has.
But you know what? I have a feeling there are many more perfect days ahead of us. As they reached Greta's car, they lingered, neither wanting to say goodbye. Finally, Zoe leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to Greta's cheek. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay? We can start planning our date." Greta nodded, her cheek tingling where Zoe's lips had touched. "I'd like that." As she watched Zoe walk away, Greta felt a surge of emotions. Excitement, hope, a touch of nervousness, but above all, joy. She was embarking on a new chapter of her life, one where she could truly be herself, love openly, and embrace all the possibilities that lay ahead. Greta got into her car, but didn't start it immediately. Instead, she sat for a moment, reflecting on how far she'd come. From the scared, confused person she'd been just a year ago, hiding behind a facade that never quite fit, to the woman she was today, confident, authentic, and on the cusp of a new romance. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.